Welcome back, rugby fans, to, of course, the Rugby Debate Show with ourselves and our guests to the test here on the Rugby Rant podcast show. My name is Ty Braga, your host for today's activities, alongside the familiar faces of Rob, the Hammer Hammerschmidt, and Scott, the big guy Ferrara. But more importantly, who takes them on in this episode 66 of the Rugby Rant? We have Mr. Paul Emerick, former USA Eagle, and now part of the program in Colorado for the USA Pathways Development. I think I said it right. Did I say it right, Paul?
You got it right.
All right. I got 90% of the way through with that mouthful. But more importantly, Paul, welcome to the show, my friend.
Hey, thanks for having me, guys.
It's a pleasure. You know, you've got a rich tradition in rugby, but this is truly your first real test.
I'm excited for it. Bring it on. Let's go.
All right. So for those fans not yet familiar with how it works, let's dive into it. Very simple formula. These gentlemen on screen are going to battle each other in a rugby debate episode where you, as the fans on the MLR Fan Zone, have told us what you want to be able to have them talk about. Today, you chose at the top was 3 things that the MLR can do in next year's season that is achievable. Let me note for everybody listening and watching, it's got to be a realistic goal that is attainable and within reach as a result. And we have assembled our team here to be able to debate that in the first part of this rant. They'll each be given 2 minutes, and should they go over their 2 minutes in their allotted rant, will receive what we haven't said for a long time is the cheese. That gets them the yellow card, and should they continue to infringe, will be promoted to the red and will be out for the next rant. So, Paul, make sure you stay under 2 minutes. Scott, do whatever you do. You normally do it. So for the rest of you out there, we're going to start this round a little differently and hand the ball to Mr. Rob Hammerschmidt, Hammer himself. Oh, what? Am I forgetting something?
Hold on, Ty. I think you're forgetting something. Maybe you didn't take your Can-I Brands boost today.
Right.
I don't know if you took this morning.
Memory, because I need that one.
Yeah.
Well, obviously you're not up to snuff here in our late recording nights, because I mean you should have taken it right before we recorded, so you can.
Right. Well, exactly that, right? Because I need that little bit of a boost. And while I have the opportunity, let me go ahead and remind everybody: Can I Boost? This is the one that gives you that little bit of extra energy, a little pep in your step. It's got a little bit of caffeine, so it gives you a bit of energy. But more importantly, this is a CBD plant-based product, 0 THC, and as a result, it's all natural, good for vegan anybody who may be inclined to that. Certainly not me. I'm South African. I like red meat. But more importantly, it's easy to be able to enjoy. It's easy to be able to take. There is also the oral spray. I think you showed me one a moment ago, Scott. Which one?
Yeah, so I use the Can I Sleep. So as you guys know, recording late here in New York, you guys are kind of in the central time zone, or Midwest, or whatever the frig time zone you guys are in. It's tough for me to I'm up at 5 in the morning. I'm in the office at 7:30. Work till 5. Come home, cook dinner for the missus, record 2 shows, record the Rooney show. Do whatever I do, and it's really tough to kind of get down from that high of recording and getting amped up for you guys. And that's where the Can-I Brands Sleep oral spray comes in. Real quick, just 8 shots to the mouth, gets me calm, gets me ready for bed. It's something I've been using since we hooked up with Can-I Brands. And this is also a product that I know that some of the Free Jacks are using in 2021 and going into 2022.
Yeah, and the one in particular that probably suits any athlete across all major sports is the Can-I Mend. It's a great recovery product. There's a balm application, there's the lotions, there's the oral spray, there's the dropper. So whatever way you find most convenient to be able to enjoy the CBD safe products, which is a wonderful alternative to those prescription drugs. If you want something that's non-habit forming, go and check out canibrands.com. We are partnered with them to be able to give you the opportunity to save even more on all of their great products with 25% saving using the promo code RANT25. Everything in your basket will be 25% off. So go ahead and drop a bunch of things in there And when you exceed $49 in your order, you'll also get free shipping to anywhere in the US that they, of course, ship to. So again, that's canibrands.com. And Scott, thanks for reminding me. There must be one out there from memory, because that's the one that I got to buy next. So with that all being said, we need to be able to remind our viewers that everybody on screen here is going to get that 2 minutes to be able to rant. The first topic at which is going to be 3 things that they identified the MLR is capable of changing in 2022. We're going to start this rant with Mr. Rob Hammerschmidt. Go ahead.
Yeah, so real quick, I mean, the premise is these are things that they can do. And so we all know we would love to see TMO, but the realistic possibility is probably not there yet from the production side. So I went in a little different direction. And one of the things I'd like to see that they absolutely can do is a weekly injury list, right? Maybe bring it out on Thursday, require all teams to bring it on Thursday. And that way, fans know who's going to be on the pitch, or at least who's available to be on the pitch come game time Saturday or Sunday. It allows those of us who participate in the Super Brew competition to get ahead of our picks and think about, who might not be available and how that might impact who we're going to select or which teams we're going to select to be the winners. But I also think it'll help fans be more engaged with, whether they're, again, at home watching the game or whether they're going to go to the park and actually see play. They'll know which players they can expect to see after the game, and they can give them a high five or whatever. The other thing I'd like to see, again, absent of TMO, is really improve and engage the ARs, or even bring in another official to watch offsides. Right. If they can't do TMO, get another set of eyes on the pitch that can help facilitate and make sure that, infractions are called correctly, or get another set of eyes if there's any kind of hargy-bargy going on there and they're looking to dole out yellows. Maybe help to improve that. They really work to improve officiating in the offseason, of course, bringing in several officials from overseas. I think this is another step that they can engage in. And finally, production value through the Rugby Network. A lot of people complain about the fact that some of those, there were kind of blackout periods in between the games or before the games. I know Scott did some pregame stuff with Rooney that provided some extra value, so Rooney fans could enjoy it. Look around, see if we can engage some fans and see if we can get some additional content both before and during the middle of the game. That's it.
Good job. You were 2 seconds under time. Well done. Take note, Mr. Scott Ferrara.
Challenge thrown down.
Shots fired.
So let's rewind a little bit and recap some of these great points. You said the TMO. Surely, yes, everybody would have thought, wow, this is going to be such an obvious fix, but it really isn't such an easy fix. Yes, we have the ability when we have the CBS broadcast or Fox, because it's an elevated broadcast standard, to even be shown in that platform, but it's not available to us throughout the regular season. So let's cast that aside for a moment. It might not be realistic for the next season, but obviously it's a mission to be able to be achieved further down the road. And let's focus on some of the other things you said. Injury list. Not only do we want to have this for our own Super Brew contest, but if you're a betting person, sports betting needs this a part of that to be able to gauge one team's advantage over another in particular matchups. So definitely agree with that point there. 1 point from Mr. Rob Hammerschmidt there. The Hammers 1 up. So AR being more responsible for the offside line. I don't know if I necessarily feel that this is kind of a difficult one to be able to answer. And maybe I didn't properly define it. But I think what the core of that was being able to monitor the offside lines even better than they are. Is that right?
Well, yeah. Well, my thinking was either, I think some of the fans complained that the ARs weren't assertive enough with the officials on family official or on pitch officials. I think a little bit of interracial reliability. Bring those people in for training so that there's consistency from place to place. Like Marquise Goodwin was always in LA, but we need to get some consistency across the board, or bring in another official on the pitch just to monitor offsides and be another set of eyes. For those. So,
I see the merit in saying that another set of eyes, in theory, should solve the problem, but I think it might also complicate it in other ways. And so that's a one still to be debated. We could probably spend half an hour on that topic. So I don't want to dig much further than we have in that regard. But the other thing you brought up, though, was the broadcast value. Those blank spaces, opportunity for sponsorship, your advertising, your marketing. You now have, with a completed season, enough content that next season, this should never happen. Yes, I recognize launching the Rugby Network, you didn't have the sponsors on board. Now, since then, you've got Geico, you've got American Airlines, you've got these polished products that already have large marketing budgets. They now need to be moved to this platform. And if you don't have that, you've still got plenty of great content with interviews from players. You've got all the access you need. That there is a really good point from Rob, because that is simple to be able to fix in the near future. Thank you very much. 2 points score. Let's hand it over to Scott Ferrara, the big guy himself. How's the weather down there?
Let's get hot, baby. You know what? I brought in our friend Arminta Gunkel last week, and I believe she took home the dub. There's a reason I picked her, because I knew she'd beat the Hammer. Anyway, I also had on my list injury reports, and I think you guys missed the third segment of that. Fantasy sports. I mean, I play in a league for European Cup, and it's so hard to figure out who's actually playing in those European Cup matches because they don't say anything. So, I mean, I've literally have played fantasy rugby in the European Cup and have had no points because none of my guys ended up playing. And you're trying to scramble the Friday before going by, the starting lineups. But I completely agree with that point. We both had it, on our list there.
You don't get a point for it.
Yeah, the second. Well, I think I should get the point because you guys didn't even bring up fantasy sports, which is probably the biggest segment this morning.
Yeah, I mean that's what Super Pro is.
So more players. Oh, shut up, Rob! Stop wasting my time here. So more player stats publicly. So I know the MLR app had stats in the app. The problem was it was combined stats from all the way from 2018. So for example, we use Dylan Fawcett. It showed his stats as all the games he played, all the tries he scored. And honestly, I wanted to see it more on a game-by-game basis than a season basis. I think that's easier for fans to understand because you were showing stats and it didn't quite add up and people were asking questions. So I think more player stats publicly should be available. I know there's a stats package that go to the teams and to some of the insiders, but they should really make that public. The last thing is, I think – and they kind of did it this year with the Steve Aoki event before the championship, but there should be an MLR rugby-related event prior to the MLR championship. And I had the idea of having, like I said, 4 sevens teams. It's almost like the way they used to do, the NBA All-Star game. They pick a captain, pick 4 captains who are going to play touch rugby. Sevens touch rugby. You can play, a round robin the day before. It's part of your ticket. You got guys from the MLR that are still in country that aren't obviously in the championship, but you want to see them play and they can have a little fun, maybe make it a charitable event. Maybe it'll help raise money for the women's team going to the next World Cup or something like that. But honestly, I love the idea of having the party with Steve Aoki, but I think we make that a rugby-related event the day before, incorporate it in the ticket, and we're good to go.
Awesome. Okay, so the fantasy sports one, you'll get half a point on that because it was both on his. But yes, it is relevant though too. But let's dive into some of the other stuff. So the MLR app, I'm going to give you a huge tick there because that's been a point of frustration even for me, for us, right? I mean, we do research for every episode, and especially when we have to reference players or teams, what resources do we have available to us? Well, we use the MLR app just like you have, in addition to the other sources that we may have available, but this is in my palm. It's easy to access, so it should be easy to be able to understand that information as well, whereas it wasn't. So when I look at a player and I see his cumulative 3 years record, how is that supposed to help me when I'm talking about a Giltini's Utah matchup? So yes, major point for Scott. I think I'm going to give him 2 for that actually because it has so much value.
Oh my goodness!
Suck it, Hammer.
Because it's been a pain point for even you.
I know a penalty for Scott, a penalty is worth 3 points, not 2.
Okay, so
exactly.
I don't have any assistant referees here, so. So the final thing that you brought up there was kind of the event, the weekend event for the final, right? I definitely see some value in that. I don't know what that product would look like, but I definitely see the importance of creating an entertainment product that is more than just that day. And to that point, maybe it should be a full days of activity. because if you're going to try and attract people from across the country, as a final should do, then you need to provide the right sort of entertainment and to keep them engaged for the weekend. Because, and again, if they end up choosing neutral venues in the future, maybe they'll think about those locations around the added value. But we can already bring that added value in with examples like Scott had said. So I think I'll add a point for that. That was a really strong round for Scott. What is it? 3.5 points there.
Hell yeah.
Exceeded the maximum. Let's hand it over to Paul.
He makes 3
Emerick.
points and gets 3.5 points. How does that make sense?
None of it makes sense. That's why
That's that fuzzy math.
South African math, yeah.
Let's hand it over to Paul. Let's hear your thoughts.
I think interesting. I'm kind of looking at things from maybe an operational standpoint as well, being like in the league. I think they're just from like traveling from town to town, the standard of accommodations and meals and stuff, we're all over the shop. So I think very achievable thing from a player standpoint is, let's standardize what hotels and then also, good meals, right? We had one pregame meal, and it was like a gas station burrito and one of them Jimmy Dean sausages, things, and we're all sitting here going, "Oh, we can't fuel ourselves on this, right?" And then I'm gonna go ahead and say it with the video review. Now I know with the World Rugby, you need cameras, this and that and the other thing. Like we probably have maybe 3 cameras at every match. Let's use them. What are we gonna lose? And if you can't overturn whatever decision, then the call on the field stays, right? I think, that's very doable. And then let's also look at some of the way the MLR has handled some yellow cards and standard sanctioning and stuff. Like we've already gone outside of the bounds of World Rugby regs, which is, I understand why they would do that because it is such a short, condensed season. What should be a 6-game suspension, let's go that down to 2 or whatever, right? So they just need to manage their player resources like that. And then, I'll go ahead and say that, to the point that Rob said he wasn't going to talk about, but we need ARs that need to be involved. And perhaps I have whether that be through professionally, right? Or, the ARs need to be trained up and they need to be more involved. And I know from, a bit of experience in doing interviews and stuff that they're really not told to engage too much, but they need to. And that's part of growing the game. There we go.
And there you have it from a rugby expert, somebody in the league, somebody that's played at the highest levels, supporting the Hammer on the AR note.
Out of here.
Who's this expert you're talking about? Is the guy standing behind me the expert?
Clearly, you don't understand how this works. This is a show about people who think they know about rugby.
All right. Sorry.
So
One of whom was just confirmed by a rugby expert.
Right. So really, in reality, Paul, you're overqualified to be on the show.
Yeah.
That's true.
So that might be the first time I'm overqualified for anything.
Well, embrace it. And from somebody who doesn't know what he's talking about, so I don't know how much merit it holds. More importantly, let's rewind and revisit some of these things that you said. So, the standard and the quality of travel and accommodations, food, everything associated for the welfare of the players. You spoke about this player welfare, right?
Yeah.
In general, even if those examples and beyond, player welfare should be a priority for any sport, any league, because they are the assets to the league, right? In addition to the fans, the stadiums, and all these other components, none of it happens without these guys out there each and every day putting their bodies on the line. So to hear that your pre-meal game is a Jimmy Dean's breakfast sandwich is probably not ideal, right? But and yes, that needs to be done. There perhaps needs to be a standard. When you travel, you should be able to go to the host city, have the same level as standard expectation as you would be receiving them, and there needs to be that across it. There needs to be a par. And this has been a criticism that we've heard from players in the past on and off the show as well. So definitely a good point there. In addition to that, I think that it won't be next year, but we would eventually like to be able to see down the road a union for the players to be represented. We've spoken about this in different versions throughout our time on the show. But that's not something that might be realistic for next year. But the pathway to that is laid with something simple, like you said. In addition to that, you said video review. Now, I wanted to be able to understand, was that game tape you were thinking about specifically, or video reviews for something like the MLR potentials in the draft?
No, as in like the ref review.
Okay.
If you want to, I'm not saying go as far to have a challenge like they do on a lot of the internationals. They want to challenge the call or whatever.
Right.
But the ability for the ref just to say, hey, I think he might have gone out of bounds or not sure when they get with their ARs and they're not sure, then ask. And,
right.
Okay, we may only have, like I said, 2 or 3 cameras, but if that picks up a overturned call, then great. And
if it doesn't, move on with the decision on the field.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
And one of them was a clear try that was called a knock on for the SaberCats. I do watch a lot of our games over and over, and part of my review is to, pick up and what were I do ref reviews with Jonathan Kaplan, right? And you're just trying to say, okay, this is not a witch hunt for our referees. This is all part of the three pillars in which we're going to grow our game, right? Coaching, players, refereeing. So, and working with him and just trying to, hey, you know what? We're human. We're not infallible, and we can't have unrealistic standards for the refs. So why not empower them a little bit with a little bit of video review, albeit 3 camera angles. And
what do you say to those people? Because this is kind of tying into what Rob had brought up with the TMO. Obviously, it's important. We as rugby fans know that we all want it, but we just don't know when we'll be there, and that every stadium has the exact same standard that's met. Because, if 2021 taught us one venue to another are not created equal. So what is your thoughts for those fans to just say that we're not there? I mean, unless we all meet the standard together, we're going to have this inequality across the league.
So who's setting the standard? Certainly we're not going to have the 8 cameras required by World Rugby, right? I think that, like you said, we're not there yet. But you watch the games, and there's at least 3 different camera angles, right? And, through I know our video analysis guy can immediately capture and rewind, and he does coding live, right? So I know the technology is there for someone to have gone back, gotten that clip from all 3 different angles, and then present it to a 5th official that's in the box that's then reviewing all 3 angles, right?
Right.
That could all be done within.
So you're just saying, just no matter use what's available for each venue.
So Rob, you have 3 or 4 cameras, right?
No. I'm on board with what Paul's suggesting, as long as across the board for that week, the home venues are only using the 3 angles that everybody else is using. What I think you want to avoid is you're at SoFi Stadium, right? And
27 cameras.
There's 27 cameras. There's all those video screens, and your officials looking on. Mike Lash looks up and goes, well, we got to take a look at that. And one team, loses out or loses a point on the board or whatever have you because of that particular ability to use the video. Whereas another team, we're not sure, so we're going to go ahead and count that as a try. Now all of a sudden, they get into the bonus point, and it makes a difference between a team making the playoffs and not making the playoffs. Just the consistency, I think, would be what we're looking for.
In that regard, you could argue that the Coliseum with the Giltinis has an advantage. Even Aviva, which is a purpose-built rugby stadium, has the right angles and does have a good broadcast value, which is why it was often chosen as the CBS Sports Game of the Week. So you're suggesting, and if I understand it correctly, Rob, that inequality can really become obvious in some venues over others that can give them an unfair advantage. Scott, do you have anything you wanted to add to that comment?
Well, I think we're closer to TMO than we think, to be quite honest. But I do think there has to be some, until we get to that 8 camera angle and all that Paul was talking about for World Rugby. Yeah, I think there has to be something, but it's hard. I think that's another hard thing to kind of officiate, especially in this time of, COVID and all that, because, it was just, people were rushing. So we have to see next spring after the Delta variant what's happening, and then I think we can go from there. But a couple of the other points I want to touch on real quick was like the food. That's something that I feel, so every team should have their sponsor that sends the opposing teams the meal plan for them. And then think about it. Most guys who are rugby fans, most people who are rugby fans, they're into athletics. They play rugby. They're still playing rugby. They like to eat healthy. Make that the sponsor and then make a code. So that way, not only are you helping out the opposing team who's coming across the country to feed them with, nutritious food that's going to fuel them, it's also an extra sponsor because this person's doing it as a business, And
on that note, what they should have given them was some rugby coffee. So allow me the window of opportunity here, Scott.
Sure.
But yeah, you're talking right about sponsors and how they can contribute. And one of those sponsors that's certainly contributing to rugby growth across the US and of course Canada is Rugby Coffee. So these guys, enjoying a cup of coffee for them means that 10% of what you have spent with them will go back to being able to help rugby youth programs across North America. This one over here is my personal favorite. It's a French Rochouet, darker blend, bolder flavors as a result. The flavor profile is intense. I love it. You might prefer something that's a little more mild, the crowd favorite. But these are both specially made North American roasts, blended for the rugby market. And every single purchase, 10% will go back to growing rugby youth programs across the U.S. What better reason do you need to be able to enjoy a cup of coffee? Wouldn't you guys agree?
Absolutely. I've already downed mine. I'm fresh out.
And I took mine on vacation because I knew I was going to need something to help us through that live draft that we went through. 2 hours on the air breaking down the draft. Call me Mel Kiper Jr. on that. But to go back to my point, another thing that when Rob was talking about having that extra AR, and Paul talking about or Paul and Rob talking about using the AR, it was funny. I felt that at one point in the season, it had become such a thing that online, and then I go to a Rooney New England match. Rooney's given advantage, breaks away down the field to score a try, and the referee, J.P. Doyle, calls it back to talk about it with the AR, and it was an infraction. It was the infraction he called advantage on against New England. So, it was like they went in the completely opposite. We're just going to stop playing now to talk to the AR. So I think we do have to find that happy medium at some point. So, it seemed to me like it just – that week it started to happen more and more where on-field officials were talking to ARs. So I don't know if it got through the MLR or there was something,
On that note about ARs, but I want to go back to something Rob had mentioned earlier about even possibly considering another official to be able to assist you with this. Because obviously the question is, are the ARs being asked to be able to be too much of them? Are we setting too high a standard considering the training, considering the assets they have, all of this? And if so, how do we get there where we want to get? We know what the target is. We want to be able to be more accurate in our officiating, but how do we get there? So, Rob, help me understand that thought process a little bit better. And then I want to hear Paul's thoughts of how he think that might work in reality.
So number one, if you're going to involve ARs more, and I think part of the problem, and Paul alluded to it, is that there was inconsistency as to how much the ARs were used or the level to which they would actually be advocates to really try to help the officials make the proper call. So I think the first step, number one, and we do this here in Illinois with wrestling officials, when you have two officials working the mat, the head official is the only person that can then ask the official or the assistant official, hey, what did you see? Right? They don't sit there and allow that assistant official to call a penalty, right? It's in the case that Scott spoke of, okay, look, I call advantage. I'm going to come back to it. AR, what did you see? So I think that's number one. Number two, spend some time bringing those ARs into a mini camp, a week or 2 weeks before the MLRC or before preseason starts, and really start to create some consistency. Here's how you need to be used. Here's how you need to advocate. Here's what officials want to hear. Here's what they're looking for. Here's situations.
Can I break in real quick, Rob? And just to add to that, what they should do is they should have teams that consistently work together. It shouldn't.
I believe by venue you can achieve that. That's not too hard. Right
and
now.
I mean, they already do that to an extent. Like Marquise Goodwin was always the one of the ARs in Los.
Yeah, but if you take a head official and two ARs that are always with each other every weekend, it starts to get a little more synergy there, and that's what they do in the NFL.
On that, branching off that point, we know that the MLR in 2021 took refereeing very seriously by first of all appointing Jonathan Kaplan to be able to assist and train referees. Then we saw JP Doyle come in. We saw, I think it was 4 professional full-time referees for the first time, full-time, right, to the league. Now, would the answer be to be able to get more full-time referees or have those 4, or whatever they decide is the right number, and some full-time ARs who would eventually be promoted into those positions higher up? Paul, what is your thoughts there?
So, first of all, I think, money fixes everything. If we could pour the resources into these people, bring them into training camps, like Rob said, get them high-level training, it probably wouldn't be a big topic of conversation. But as the league is growing, we're doing what we can for the resources. And, Scott, the way they structure their refereeing is the guy in the middle will travel around, but then they have crews of ARs that are like locally based. Houston and Austin, we shared a couple of ARs that would travel back and forth consistently. So, again, if that crew were to travel with that ref, you're talking again about some more resources that would, I don't know what that would cost, right?
More than it does now.
Yeah, more than it does now, right?
Well, then maybe it's taking those head officials and just making East Coast and West Coast just like they do the AR teams. Maybe it's that point at one point. But
yeah, and then I'm playing in Italy for a couple of years, and I lived through as a player the evolution of amateur refereeing into professional refereeing. Right, that was always one of the things our coach. I won't swear in Italian what he used to say, but he had some choice curses.
Yeah, we got no Italian viewers. I don't watch rugby.
Not here in the States anyway. But, so there is a growing curve for professional referees. And, I do know that Jonathan Kaplan does a wonderful job. He works hard. And, I'm sure he's going to keep advocating for more resources to put into refereeing. It's definitely one of the 3 pillars that we got to continue growing, right? So
absolutely,
I think achievable. Next step for our domestic ARs, right? We got to develop our own domestic referees. We can't always be relying on foreign referees to come over. That the idea is that they're ARs. We get them involved more and more. We give them some more responsibilities. Simple things like calling the off sideline, right? One guy managing 30 people, wrap your head around that. That's a lot. And Rob, it's pretty interesting, the old leaguey style with the one referee behind the defense and one behind the attack. Let's put our American spin on it. And maybe that's the answer. And maybe we're the incubator then that World Rugby says, hey, this is actually not a bad idea.
I got one question for Paul. So now, as all the academies are going to start to come back up again, I think we're going to have a more academy season, and a lot of these academy teams are going to be playing curtain raisers. Would it be beneficial to have those same referees that are going to do the MLR match and have one of those ARs be the head official and have the head official be the AR for that curtain raiser? Just, again, to give them more time together and putting the AR in the position to have that head official.
I think you'll run into some ref welfare questions.
Yeah, that's right? 4 hours out there on the field in a 95-degree day.
Listen, Scott Green gets, the more the girls, go nuts.
But, there definitely should be part of the referee pathway of that thing, that you're talking about, right? So it may not be the ARs for the MLR game, but it's the next guy in line. Right? Or maybe if it's a really promising guy in the middle, maybe he forgoes an AR opportunity to be roughing this academy league as the academy league grows, right? You're seeing more and more clubs that are investing into a very definitive pathway with the academy and the MLR system.
Excellent stuff. Thanks for your comments, Paul, and from all of our ranters here. One of the things that I have as a great takeaway from that last little bit of banter back and forth about the ARs, and I wrote it down because I didn't want to forget it, was developing domestic referees. Really big part of it. And I'm going to give you an extra point for that. But I'm also going to give you an extra point because I learned through Wikipedia that you're from Iowa. And I am in Iowa, so you get a point.
Is that right? Where in Iowa are you?
So you guys take 5. I'm in Des Moines, Iowa. So
all right,
yeah,
good. They just got a new coach who was he played for the Utah Warriors. Des Moines
right? Yeah, John Cullen. He was on our show a few weeks back, and the head coach is South African. So. Yep. But it's not like there aren't enough South Africans in rugby in the US, right? You just need one more. That's all you need. It's just one more. But, gentlemen, it has been a great debate. If I'm looking back at the scores here, we need to be able to define who is going to be the winner of this part or this round. But before we do that, we'll be back after a few words from one of our sponsors.
I would like to thank one of our sponsors. Tighthead Brewing Company is Chicago's premier location to watch rugby and enjoy quality ales and lagers for all seasons. Located in Mundelein, Illinois, and the heart of Lake County, owner Bruce Doerr and the Tighthead staff will ensure that you are kept well hydrated so you don't miss a single scrum. Tighthead's tap room is like the familiar rugby clubhouse in which friends and teammates can meet, socialize, and enjoy the wide variety of brews on tap. Don't forget that this fall there's some exciting rugby coming up to enjoy at Tighthead. We've got the USA Qualifiers against Canada. We've got Women's Rugby World Cup. We've got the Premier Sevens in October. Of course, we have the World Sevens Series, and we cannot forget the exciting test matches for the United States against both Ireland and New Zealand. All that can be seen at Tighthead Brewing. So hey, Chicago, when you want rugby, Tighthead Brewing Company will satisfy your thirst. Tighthead, it's worth more than a try.
Mm-hmm. And there you have it, rugby fans. As per normal, we are crowned a new winner, but I want to remind all our viewers at home that you can, of course, learn more about us by following us under the handle at Rugby Rant Pod on all social media. You can find us under that handle. In addition, make sure that you check out the Rugby Network for future episodes where a new episode will be released each and every Friday. And you can continue to be able to learn more about us there and hear more rants as we debate each and every week topics that have been chosen by you as the Rugby Rant fans all across the world. And we thank you for tuning in, and we will catch you at the next. And rugby fans, again, we are back here to be able to debate the topics you have chosen on the MLR Fan Zone. And here on the Rugby Rant, we have delivered the team one more time to be able to tackle this topic. And the second part of the rant is to talk about the upcoming matches, the Rugby World Cup qualifiers between the US and Canada, which will be taking place September 4th and September 11th. One on U.S. soil and the other on Canadian soil in Vancouver and Glendale, Colorado are the venues that have been chosen. Now, gentlemen, as you know, we need to be able to share the opportunity for each of you to be able to rant. You know, you're given 2 minutes, but we're going to divide this topic into 2. As the first part, our ranters will be talking about the predictions. What's going to be the outcome between U.S. and Canada first in Canada, and then secondly on September 11th on U.S. soil, as I mentioned before, in Glendale, Colorado at Rugby Town, USA. Then, when we're done with that, they're going to talk about the quality of the rosters that have been chosen for those matchups, both for the U.S. and Canada. Gentlemen, do we understand the rules? All right. We're going to start it off then where we ended the last round, and we're going to hand the ball first to Mr. Paul Emerick.
Well, my prediction is obviously a USA win at home and away.
Both times?
Both times. There we go.
End of rant. Tell us why. Come on, don't make me draw blood from a stone here.
The cactus speaks.
I think, and I'm talking with some of the assistant coaches, we're having a lot of guys in the MLR playing domestically, which is okay, but there's also a cohesion factor there. And perhaps Canada might have that little cohesion factor. I think we're talking about, they've got 12 guys from the Arrows, right? So definitely a cohesion factor playing a part in that. But, come on, always beat Canada. Like USA, we'll win both of these.
Always beat Canada. That's a new version of ABC. ABC. I like it. But I'm going to press you for a scoreline prediction.
Let's go.
Or at least points difference. Let's go points difference.
Yeah, points difference. I think we'll win by 15 or more.
Okay, 15 or more on both occasions. Okay, you don't think the second time around there might be a little tighter affair?
No, I think we're going to be consistent and clinical, and we'll do 2 good halves. All right, we can play some good ball. We showed that against England. So,
all right, okay. Talking about being clinical, that was the entire rant from him. Was America will win.
Simple.
Clinical. I like it. And you know what? Done. We're going to deliver the ball over to Scott Ferrara. Tell us what you think, because I know he'll have something to share.
We're still cooking, baby. Remember, back-to-back World War champs, the United States. I do. I'm going with Paul, though. I think the U.S. is going to run the table in these 2 World Cup qualifiers. I'm going to say plus 20 or minus 20 in the first match, and minus 12 in the second. I think that cohesion factor is going to make Canada tighten up a little bit on defense. And I think USA, up front definitely has the biggest advantage. I mean, we'll go into specific guys later, but we know that we have that. We saw that start to kind of come together in that summer international window. I will talk about one guy. We got, Butch back. We got Dylan Fawcett back up. Even depending if he's not even, playing time, he's a proven leader. So I think that's just going to get guys fired up. If you guys have never seen Dylan play or seen Dylan be a leader on the field, I mean, it's that chill factor. So yeah, I'm going to say USA runs the table, minus 20 in the first one, minus 12 in the second one. I think it's going to be a little tight.
Right. I do also think that, if I was to be able to offer a prediction, it would be closer on the second matchup, only because I give them the benefit of the doubt that, you're going to be playing largely a very similar team as you would the first time around, that hopefully you should be able to close the gap. But I'm going to leave my comments for last. I'm going to allow Rob to be able to take the floor now.
Okay, so I'm going to go in a little different direction. I agree with both of the gentlemen that are guests here are on the show today. Both my man Scott and our guest Paul, but I'm going to go a different direction in the result. First of all, the United States in the last 12 matches is 11-0-1, so that's clear that they're going to win both matches. But Canada generally plays a much narrower game when the matches are in Canada, right? I think one of the most recent results was as few of spread as 5 when it was in Canada. They're playing in Newfoundland on September 4th. And at St. John's. And so I'm going to go with a 10-point spread there. I'm going 35-25 the United States. I think that on September 11th, there's going to be a lot to play for. It's a significant event here in the United States. Remembrance event, if you will, and it's going to be in Rugby Town. And I think I'm going to go with a 25-point spread. I'm going with 42-17.
42-17. All right.
I'd like to amend my comments. Maybe it'll be a little tighter on September 11th because they got some weird PA announcer in Rugby Town. I don't know. You might bring the team down.
Is it weird because you just don't recognize awesome?
That's minus a point, Ty. Just remember that, minus a point.
Yeah. Before Rob, it was all complimentary. After he loses, screw this guy. So let's remind the viewers of what we covered here. So Rob, great point, by the way, talking about how their gameplay may be different on U.S. soil, perhaps a little tighter. They're also playing in unfamiliar territory, and I want to correct myself. I think I originally said it was Vancouver, but I must have been thinking of the Canada Sevens. Yeah. I'll give you a point for that, for correcting me. It's the only time I'll give a point for that. But it is irrelevant because they're playing somewhere different. I don't know what the conditions are like there. Maybe it will be a closer affair because they'll be less likely to be able to try all these interesting combos and all these new tactics. Like maybe it might just be about playing the basics and doing them well and building from a continuity of having 12 Toronto Arrows players, as Paul mentioned. You've got a lot to be able to build from. So I wouldn't be surprised if it has some of the same qualities that we know from the domestic rugby that we've seen from Canada with the Arrows. But yeah, there's going to be a little bit of experimentation, but I don't think it'll be nearly as much as you would have seen in the summer series. And looking back at some of those records, as Scott had pointed out, if you look at those records, it wasn't favorable. It wasn't flattering for either the US or Canada. But you have to imagine that with the one stronger performance that was evident with the US against, I think it was England the first time around, that was enlightening. We looked at combinations that hadn't been used before. We looked at tactics that hadn't been seen before. We also saw a stronger USA side in the final 20 that we had ever seen before in many years, right? Which is to their criticism when the legs have gotten tired and the game had gotten a little bit more sloppy. So I think my predictions will be 2 wins. And listening to what you've got, I think I also might change my opinion a little bit more. Maybe the first matchup will be closer than I originally thought. So maybe it is going to be an 8 to a 12-point spread difference, should I say. And then the second one on USA soil might be the larger difference between the two. So I think I'm probably going to lean towards some of the – and Rob's comments swayed me a little bit more to that. Initially, I was agreeing both with the other guys.
Well, I wonder the second half of the game playing in Glendale, depending on what happened in the first matchup, will the coaches maybe do, put in some guys that would normally get playing time, so that's why I feel it'll be maybe a little tighter in that match. I feel we go into halftime with a lead and maybe Canada scores, a little bit more because we put in some guys that maybe haven't had time previously.
I guess it depends on what the result of the first matchup is. But like you said, if you do win that first matchup and they both are rugby qualifying matches, you might put yourself in a little bit better of a position because on the back of that, only a week or two later, you now have another matchup against the South American side that if you have the ability to try different combinations because you could rest some more mature players, you might choose to do that if you think you're in a better position already going into that second matchup. So that's another good point from Scott there. Paul, did you have any final thoughts on top of everything we've already shared?
Rob, you're talking about I've been to St. John's in Newfoundland, and it's a very coastal city, so the weather in September might play a part of that, and they also have a 30-minute time zone change there. So that time zone, that 30 minutes might be a bit much for the guys to adjust.
Oh, those were all the things I was thinking. I just didn't want to take your thunder.
All right. So I think we've taken the opportunity deserving to share our thoughts of the predictions, but we need to be able to turn our attention to the other half of this conversation, gentlemen, which is the quality of the rosters that have already been revealed. Now, by the time that we had the show, the roster for Rugby Canada would have already been a few days old. For us in the recording, it only arrived today. So we'll only think about sharing a few standouts that we think are key players rather than diving so deep into the roster and bring out some of the key talking points. And to be able to open this rant, we'll start it as we do always where it ended in the previous. So Rob, go ahead and take the floor.
I actually made a roster of, who would be my starting 15, and I went with a little different direction. I'm interested in Ben Bonasso. I would go with a really, really solid pack of experienced players and put Bonasso on the open side. I think it is a really expansive game. I was impressed with him for Rooney. I'd love to see him get his first cap playing with Honko and Cam Dolan. So I'd like to see that. I would also put Michael Baskin as a starting 9. I know it's controversial, but I love the way he plays in the loose. I've always said it in all the shows. He is always off the shoulder of somebody running, and I think he has the potential to really create and turn over some points. I would like to see Marcel Brockie come in from fullback into the centers where he naturally plays, and I'd like to see him paired with Bryce Campbell. I think that 1-2 punch, Bryce punches a hole, and Marcel runs off that shoulder at an angle. And then I'd really like to see at the wings Dyer and Cruze. So that would be interesting. For Rugby Canada, Kyle Bailey is going to bring an edge. I love Kyle Bailey. It's one of the reasons his edge. One of the reasons he is captain of the NOLA Gold this last season. So I love to see him. And then I want to see in the centers again. I'm making Scott blush here with Ben Lesage, of course, Toronto Air, but Quinn Nawati. At the center. Quinn, for a young kid, really impressed me. I'd like to see him get his chance and really begin to accumulate those caps.
Right. Out of the handful of names you've already identified as standouts, it seems like probably 50 or 60% of them are Rooney. So Scott's already feel like he's winning. So let's hand it over to him.
Stroking his ego because he likes to be stroked.
We're going to leave that one there and move on to Scott.
All right, I'm in the hot corner, and Rob's was taking a lot of my stuff. So I was actually going to talk about the back row and the second row. I mean, second row, Savetta, Breakley, Mahoney, Peterson. Any of those four guys can start, in my opinion. Like I said, going into the summer internationals, I think you start with the two Rooney guys just because they've played together. I mean, now we've had a longer camp, so maybe guys have been nicked up or guys are playing better in pairs and who's a better jumper on the lineouts or whatever at this particular time. But I always feel like if the guys are continuing to gel, throw them in there for the first match. And that's what I was going to say about Hanko and Ben Bonasso. Ben Bonasso coming out and definitely going to get his first cap. Wouldn't be surprised if he starts in Canada with Hanko right there. Andrew Guerra right behind him. And you got Cam Dolan and Fonana Schultz is back there too to back him up. I think what's interesting is you were talking about Marcel Brash at fullback. I think they're going to stick with Will McGee the entire time. I think I think you're right. I think Marcel is going to play a little more up front there. As far as my nines, honestly, I don't want to see Ruben De Haas play. The only reason being is the two guys you just spoke about for Rugby Canada. And Quinn Nawati can be started at a wing. They've been playing him at center, but honestly, he had more games and more minutes in Rooney as a wing than anything else. And his counterattack on those kicks against teams like, OGs, they were devastating, and they turned things on for guys like Andy Ellis to then make a play on some offloads. So, I mean, Rugby Canada up front just seems like a mess right now. I don't know why. It seemed like a mess going into the summer internationals. It seems like a mess going in right now. And, cohesion's a big thing, but I just don't think they have the horsepower up front. And I think one guy we have to watch is how much Paul Mullen plays. I don't like to talk about individuals that much, but I do think there was something. Paul Mullen just didn't look right. He didn't look on in the summer internationals. So I think we have to see what happens with Paul Mullen this time around, because he really, in my opinion, he needs to have a really big performance.
Right. And, talking about those performances of the summer internationals just for a moment, revisiting it, you spoke about the scrum, the quality of the scrums really on both sides, identifying a couple of key players like Mullen and whatever else. They were lacking, especially for Canada. And for the US, I got to be honest, I was also quite surprised that it didn't stand up against some of the true tests at the international level that I thought it did, because I thought we were in a much better position. So it certainly opened up a few question marks. And I think that if we look at those question marks, Canada just has a few more than the US does right now.
Well, and hold on, and I saw Paul Mullen play, in New York, where he beat the crap out of Rooney. So that's why I was no, seriously. I mean, he was bullying at the breakdown. He was the train in the scrum, and to him fall flat in those summer internationals was just a really big letdown for me. I was, 5 meters away from him kicking the shit out of Rooney for 80 minutes. Mm-hmm. So it was,
and you would think with the experience, I mean, certainly one of the most experienced that we have, at least in those key positions, that I hope that we get to see that. Now, you did make a comment that you think that you, and help me understand it, maybe I misunderstood it, that you hope that you do see him or that you don't see him there.
No. I want to see him in. I think we have to see what the outcome is on his play, because like I said, it was a very big letdown in the summer internationals. And I know it really doesn't mean anything for USA Rugby in those particular internationals, but even if you get your butt kicked in the scrum, Paul Mullins has that bully mentality on the field, and he rides that line. And that's something that helps out our USA Eagles, because I think some of the bigger international teams don't have that. And when you have Paul Mullen in his right mind, being a little bit of a bully, it kind of gets in the opposing team's head. And I think that's where we need to be.
You just got to watch him slapping his opposition across the way during a ruck.
That's what I'm saying.
A yellow card.
Old school.
You got to get caught.
Little on-field justice.
Oh, you don't know anything about yellow cards, do you?
No.
So with that window, Paul, let's hand it over to you.
Well, I mean, I think Rob and Scott covered a lot of the player aspect, but I think one thing we're kind of generally talking about is, making some difficult decisions about players, which now let's talk about depth of USA players and that quality of depth, right? With the MLR, there's only one team in Canada. We're allowed to bring on Canadians within our domestic league here as non-foreigners, but the majority of the players that are on the MLR teams in America are Americans, right? So, we're starting to produce this, and we're just getting started. We're starting to produce some depth, right? I remember when I was playing, it was, the overseas guys, and then, who we could scramble to get together domestically, right? And that's no knock to the domestic guys at those times, but they weren't in full-time environments, right? So this is a good, a good discussion and a good problem to have to talk about, do we play this guy or that guy?
What do we do with the Paul?
It was like,
how do you pick the
wings? Yep. You're in a full-time environment, ipso facto, more times than that, you'll be playing, right?
I mean, listen to these wings: Christian Dyer, Ryan James, Mika Kruse, Ryan Mattias. Christian Dyer was in the sevens program the entire time. Ryan James won a championship with the Glatinis, and Mika Kruse and Ryan Mattias were playing full time in the MLR. I mean, how do you pick out of those four guys who's going to start at any point in the next two matches?
And that being said, there's a lot of players that have. That's at the national team level, but at a MLR level, we're playing on the wing. I mean, I think of Mikey Teo as an example, that there was a lot of criticism that he was not played to his best ability in the choice of position, right? So there's a lot of interchanging parts. Robert highlighted that with a few players that he mentioned. And, alternate choices that are available. If it was a Ruben de Haas as your first pick for a 9, or is it a Baska? Me, personally, I like the options for both. Baska, for me, though, just was electric when he came on in those final moments of those matches in the Summer International, and kind of a new spark and a new step. And it's not to discredit one over another. It's just, as to Paul's point, we're in a fortunate position that we now have options that might not have existed only just a couple of years ago, that we have the characters and the depth in positions that we have all of this conversation possible.
Yeah. And think about the fact that when we talk about those scrum halves, we've left out one of the scrum halves that's in the 31-man roster that's had the most caps at scrum half than either of the other two, and that is Nate Osberger, and we haven't even really talked about it.
And, and that's because it might be overlooked because he wasn't there last time around. He still was on the injured list. Likewise, as Scott had pointed out with Fawcett, a couple of other names that would be usual characters a part of that squad, because of their experience and the maturity they have as players, which is invaluable to a side, especially when you have the heightened stakes of being a Rugby World Cup qualifier. And on that note, we probably should have taken an opportunity to be able to see where the placings might put them. But in the Rugby World Cup qualifiers, ultimately, the formula is very simple. You want to win both games to be able to get a better position for the 2023 Rugby World Cup. Although you could argue, does having the top spot put you actually in a better position? But that's a debate for another day when we talk about that after these matchups. But for now, we need to be able to put a pin in it, and we need to be able to remind our viewers that you have been watching the Rugby Rant podcast show. If you want to continue to be able to enjoy it, follow us online with the handle at Rugby Rant Pod, where you can find new content weekly, whether it be each Monday night with a new Run, Pass, or Kick interview, where we take the opportunity to put a rugby insider under the microscope and he shares or she shares their views. But in addition, follow us on the Rugby Network every Friday, where we will share a new rugby debate just like this one here. And now, in the second part of this, I need to be able to crown a winner as well, right? Is that right, gentlemen? Do I do a winner on this round?
Yes.
I do.
If you want.
If I want.
It's your choice.
Because I can do anything I want as the referee, right? I claim it. No, I can't do that. I didn't actually score this one, so I got to go with gut instinct. And I think the last thing that I ended up revisiting and driving home a key point is what makes me feel that Scott will take this one. All right, because a lot and look at him already with his cup and his prize.
Listen, I just like to say, I think I've started the first Rugby Rant pod like coaching tree. Arminta got the win last week. Mike Parazzini has been on the show a couple of times and had some great showings. Craig Gradelli, I think, won once.
Yep.
So I'm branching out my people here to take these wins, including the wins I get. So I take those wins and kind of pad my stats a little bit with them.
Yeah, do what you need to do to make yourself feel better.
Hammer, you can't catch up. Just leave it. You're in the dust. You're mad that a 340-pound prop is leaving you in the dust. It's okay, Ham. It's okay, Ham.
Hey, listen, are you still on IR and waiting to run that match against?
No, me and Fodes. Yeah, I'm waiting on Fodes now. His 34 or 36-year-old body is breaking down. I guess I don't know. He's not answering me back.
Come on, just scared then, obviously, right?
Obviously scared, obviously.
Well, once again, it has been a blast here with the team from the Rugby Rant podcast show where we think we know about rugby, but there's one guy who did. And we need to be able to remind you that Paul Emerick was our guest. He won the first round and certainly held his own in the second. Paul, we'd like to be able to end of each episode, give an opportunity to our guests to send a shout out to anybody important. Maybe you have a special cause you want to draw attention to. Please, the floor is yours now.
I just want to give a shout out to the Iowa Youth Rugby Association, and year in, year out, the Sevens model of introducing rugby into schools is showing some good growth, and we're starting to see some quality kids that are getting a basis of rugby coming out of Iowa. So a shout out to all the coaches there. I have a lot of old teammates from Northern Iowa that are coaching there, and shout out to those guys for continuing to cultivate and grow the game.
Right. Keep up the good work, right? And helping us do that good work is Rugby Coffee. Make sure you check them out for your cup of coffee that will give 10% back to youth rugby. And who knows, it may even find its way into the hands of youth rugby in a state where you live and in a town that you support. So, and once again, thank you very much for watching this episode of the Rugby Rant podcast show. My name is Ty Braga, your host for today's activities, alongside Rob, the Hammerschmidt, Scott Ferraro, the big guy himself, and on behalf of Paul Emerick, we thank you for watching this episode, and we will see you at the next.